Hi guys, welcome to another episode of the Beautiful You Show. Thank you for joining me. You're going to be hearing construction because a neighbor is building a house. You might hear some wind because it's kind of windy in here, but just bear with me. So today I am going to kind of like talk story to you. So I recently went on a trip, which is what I shared in a couple other videos. And so I went on a trip to the States to attend a workshop. So this is my birthday month. So as a present to myself, I wanted to take a trip. And at first I was gonna go to New York because I love New York. I love sightseeing. I love adventure. And then this workshop came about. So one of the people that I follow on Facebook and I follow her on IG and I listen to her podcast, her name is Cathy Heller. She was giving a workshop for like an in-person workshop based off of her, what is that called? Based off of her podcast. So there were 2 days of all-day workshops. And so when I first heard it was announced, I was like, oh my gosh, I have to be there. I just felt like I needed to be there. And I thought, okay, so since I was planning a trip anyways, I might as well, go to California and attend this workshop. And then maybe another time I can go to New York. So I flew to California. I was very excited, but I was also very nervous. I had never taken a trip by myself without having to like meet up with friends or meet up with family and like meet them there and go on that adventure together. So this was going to be my first time actually just traveling by myself. I did meet up with people and friends and stuff, but it was more like a solo trip. And so I was nervous at first, but when I got there, so there were 2 days of workshops, and it was amazing. We had a bunch of different people in the audience. Some were people with side hustles that they wanted to be. So let me backtrack a little bit. If you guys have watched my other video of my top 5 podcasts, it's called Don't Keep Your Day Job. And so what that podcast is about, it's about following your heart, following your passion, and being able to create a business out of it. That's just the gist of it. So on her podcast, she has lots of different people. She has actors, singers, she has people that have their own blogs that they've been successful with, crafting people. She has authors. And so one of my favorite episodes, if you do get a chance to listen to, is the author Jen Sincero. She's on the podcast. It's a wonderful, wonderful episode. So in the audience, there was a bunch of different people that, like I said, have side jobs, but they want that to be their main job, or they're just creative people looking for other creative things to do. There were people that have podcasts. We had a couple actresses, just a whole bunch of people wanting to live their truth and follow their heart. And so it was an amazing 2 days. We heard different speakers. And so we had an actor gave our keynote speaker. An actor gave our keynote speech. And he shared some nuggets with us. And we had a real estate person. We had somebody that has their own crafting business. We had somebody that used to be a former teacher and now she owns a shop. We had a furniture person. We had an actress, comedian. We had another comedian, a writer. So we had the gamut of people, and they just were all sharing their nuggets about their past and how they came about doing the work that they do now and how they feel fulfilled and how they keep going and how they stick with it even when it might be hard or stressful or they might not see the gains. And of course with that you have the different stories. You know, you have some that it was an easier path. They followed their heart and the universe aligned. And then you had those that had to really struggle, had to really stick with it. So today I'm going to share with you a couple of the nuggets that I got from the workshop, and then I'll speak about it. And so let's see. I'll probably share maybe 2 or 3 because it does get a little in depth. Okay. So the first one I'm going to share. And so, let me go back. So while I was attending the workshop, usually I take really detailed notes. I am a note taker. I feel like it gets ingrained in my brain a little bit more. And like the older I get, the more notes I feel like I'm taking. But this time, for some reason, it just spoke to me to take notes, like doodles. I used to always doodle. If there was a speaker and I had a hard time visually watching them, I would doodle to help me pay attention. And so for some reason, it just spoke to me during this workshop to doodle while speakers were talking. And it like I would hear what they're saying and then visually ideas would pop into my head. So I'll just share some of those with you. So this is the first one. It says, tell your story, how you tell your story and craft a narrative, who you are, what you're about, and be the protagonist. And what that was talking about, so there's different parts to that. One, I have a hard time telling my story because there's different people that are involved in my story. And I don't want to tell my story and create possible negativity towards them because there's things that I've experienced that have been really hard. There's situations, there's events, you know, there's different things. And so I've always been very protective of my story, who I tell it to, how I tell it. And so listening to the speaker talk about telling your story, it just hit home this time, and it really made sense to me that this is my story. And if I want to have authentic connections with people, I have to be okay with telling my story. And one other thing that he said that really struck me was craft your narrative. And so you are the owner of your story. You are the author. This is your life. Your life is your story. Your life is your journey. And you can craft the narrative however you need to. One, to share it and connect with other people, but to also get it out there. And so I really like that because I feel like if I don't share my story, then I'm not sharing all of me. Then a part of me is holding myself back. And so I've gotten much better, much more comfortable with talking about my story. And I have, what is that called? It's also been very healing. There's not as much pain associated with the story, and not everything is painful. There's some really good parts of, you know, a person's story also, but there's also experiences that are hurtful and that I'm still healing from. But when he talked about that, it just made so much sense that that you really are the author of your life. You are your own hero. Your life, your journey, that's your story, that's your narrative, and you can tell it however you want to and need to. Okay, so another thing, this was from Kathy herself, and so I've thought about this before. This I don't know if you can see it, but it says you can use your time to be mindful, or as much as, I'm trying to read it backwards, as much as using that time being irritable. It's the same amount of time. And then it says, practice. This is supposed to be like the myelin sheath in our brain, and that's why I drew it like this. But it says practice, and for my own notes I put mindfulness, emotion regulation, and compassion, and it talked about changing your neural pathways. So I've heard this before. Like, Kathy wasn't the first one I heard it from. I've heard it before, that how we experience things in our memories, we create these pathways in our brain. And it's just like when we hear a song and it takes us back to the first time we heard that song, or a good memory that we have of that song, and we feel all those things again, we feel all those emotions, or we smell something, it takes us back to a memory. So we train ourselves. We can also train ourselves to be irritable. So have you ever noticed that with a certain person, there's a certain way you interact with them, there's a certain dynamic, and it could be that nothing even happened, but you're so used to responding to them in that way. You're so used to having that relationship, that dynamic with them. And so if you don't like that, you have to practice changing it. And it takes practice to be mindful. It takes practice to stop yourself from responding and reacting the way you usually do, to change that. Sorry, there's a saw going on. Again, my neighbor is building a house. And I love that because, so I had an experience. I was at a copy shop. I was making copies. And there was a line. And so I was standing in line, and the person that was being helped was an older gentleman, and they were talking about technology, and he was having issues with his email, and the clerk was trying to help him, but he wasn't able to understand that the clerk did not know what to do for him. And so he just kept asking questions, and they kept going on. And I'm standing in line, and I'm like, I got places to be, I got things to do, like, can we wrap this up? And my, my story is going. I'm telling myself I have places to go, I have things to do, you're gonna be late, you're gonna do this, you're gonna, and I'm working myself up, and I'm getting more irritated and more irritated. And finally I caught myself, and this was before the workshop that I had this experience. So when she said this, it made me smile because it reminded me of this story. And I can see myself working myself up. And so finally I stopped, and I was like, what are you doing? You're standing here and you're creating this bigger story, and you're fueling yourself up with irritability, when you could stand here and use this time to practice mindfulness. You could use this time to think about things that make you happy. You could think about, taking deep breaths. And so I had to just stop. And it was almost like, you ever seen the air just go out of a balloon? It almost like all this irritation I was building up just was released. And it was like, and I just let it go. And I stood there and I was practicing mindfulness. And then I started thinking of this man, and I was like, I wonder how frustrating and irritating it must be for him to have this issue happen and not be able to get resolved. And now he thinks he has to go all the way to somewhere else that takes like 30 minutes to get there to get his issue resolved. And I started feeling compassion for him. And then I started wanting to help him. And then I started feeling bad for having recently been in the line and being irritable towards him. And I had to let that go because, one, I didn't want to build guilt. I wanted to stay in the mindfulness. Oh, how is that? The wind just knocked my camera down, but we back. And so I had to go back to the compassion and the mindfulness. And when she was talking about this, about you have to actively change your neural pathways. So you have to actively practice. I'm sorry that the light's going in and out. It's because the wind is blowing. Here, there. Let me open the curtain. You have to actively practice mindfulness and change the way you think. Change the thoughts, change the story that you're running in your head. So I love that. Okay, the last one that I'm going to share, because this video is going for a long time and I didn't know that it was going to go for a long time. So this one says, clarity comes from action. And on the bottom it says, inaction increases anxiety. And so that really resonated with me, because I've heard that before. I've heard other people talk about clarity comes from doing, clarity comes from doing, clarity comes from action. And what they talk about is just doing something. So I think a lot of times we spend emotions, we spend time being anxious and being worrisome. And that is because we're inactive. Like, we know we have things to do, but sometimes we might just be stuck on the couch, or we might be stuck at our desk, and we're getting stuck in the thoughts, in the frustration, in the anxiousness of outcomes that we're thinking might happen. Like, it might go bad, it might not work out the way we want it to, and so that keeps us stuck and that keeps us immobile. But nothing gives us clarity like actually doing something, because when we actually do something, we can find out what is working, what isn't working, what we have to tweak, what we have to change. And so that really struck me, because I can get overwhelmed, I can get anxious, and instead of being more productive and being more active, I can get stuck in those thoughts. And so now, I try to remind myself, clarity comes from action. Clarity comes from action. So whenever I feel stuck, I'm like, okay, what can I do? What steps can I take? And it doesn't have to be big steps. Sometimes it's just steps, tiny steps. Can I write an email right now? Can I do a post that I need to do? Can I film a video? What can I do to get the ball rolling? And keep doing those little steps so that I don't get stuck in the anxiousness. I don't get stuck in the frustration. And then there is another one that kind of goes along with that. Let me see if I can find it real quick. Where is it? Where is it? I don't know if I can find it. If I can find it, I will share it with you. I think I'm almost there. I think I'm almost finding it. So sorry. I'm looking for it. Oh, here it goes. It says, do the work, then edit, don't edit along the way. And so in doing and doing and doing and getting clearer and clearer and clearer, they talked about don't edit along the way, because what tends to happen is we become perfectionists, we over edit, and next thing you know, we don't have anything to show for it. So do all the work. Whether if you're a photographer, take all the pictures, then edit. If you're a videographer, film for as long as you need to, and then go into it and tweak it. If you're a crafter, build all the things you want to build, make all the things you want to make, then edit along the way, so that you have physical products. And it encourages you to do more, versus if you edit along the way, you might end up with nothing, and then you get more disheartened, you get more discouraged, and I like that. And so those are some nuggets. I have more. I might share more. If you want to hear more, let me know. Give me a thumbs up, give me a comment. But thank you so much for watching, and I'm so sorry this video is so long. I didn't expect it to go that long. But have a great day. Thank you. Bye.